Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the iGaming Super Show. Today's sessions will cover a vast array of SEO insight, starting with international SEO from Oban Multilingual, and John Murphy is going to give the first presentation on that. And then we'll sort of expand onto the Demon SEO panel, and then we'll sort of go from there into a session on the future of SEO and the sort of workings of that. And then we'll finish up with our 4th session looking at PPC advertising and the sort of strategies and tactics involved. So the first session today will be international SEO, looking at the latest global gaming trends, opportunities, and expert multilingual search tips from John Murphy from Oban Multilingual. John, thank you.
Okay. Hello? Yes. Right, I'm just going to work out if standing down here, can everybody see and hear me okay, or is it a bit dark? Bit dark? Okay, I'll go back up. Okay, thanks, James. Well, it's good to see with Volcano Ash, Calvin Air, and subsequent flesh-eating zombies that still quite a few people have made it today, so great. My name's John Murphy, as James said. I'm a senior account manager at Oban Multilingual. I'm going to tell you who Oban Multilingual are in a second, but my main role is strategizing and consulting on global search campaigns, and I've been with the company about 3 years. So today's talk is looking at international SEO, latest global gaming trends, opportunities, and expert multilingual search tips. And really, if you're somebody in the room that is operating in one market at the moment and is looking at approaching a global strategy for the first time, looking at the first time for going, say, into several other markets and wondering what are the core considerations that you need to be making, we'll be covering some of that. If you're somebody that's operating search campaigns in 6 or 7 markets already and are seeing different levels of success in various markets, and you're looking at how can I better perform in other countries. We'll cover some of that today as well. And also, if you're somebody that's operating in 10 markets and you're performing fantastically in everything that you're doing, in which case, well done. We'll also go into some sort of key elements about how you can even maximize things further in markets using SEO today. So we've got quite a bit to get through. First off, I'm just going to spend 10 minutes just kind of giving a bit of an introduction to multilingual SEO and going over some of the crucial considerations that you need to be making within your search campaigns. Now, some of this probably will be stuff that you're already aware of. I imagine a number of people in the room are sort of quite au fait with SEO, but it's amazing that when you go into international SEO, how many sort of the core elements of SEO campaigns are overlooked in terms of some of the considerations you need to be making when taking things international. So I will spend 10 minutes covering that. And then we'll move on to looking at some key emerging markets within gaming this year, so specifically Russia, Romania, Italy, France, and I'll provide some expert tips for search within those markets. So whether it's working with a market where there's a small linking environment, whether it's working with an international search engine, I'll provide some tips on that. And finally, we'll come through to looking at Google markets, and if you're running campaigns in Google, what are the top tips for 2011 in terms of multilingual search as well. We should have some good time left at the end for some questions as well. Okay, so just the boring bit. Oban Multilingual, we're a multilingual search engine marketing agency. We've been running around 10 years. Unique thing about us is this international element that we have. So 95% of the search campaigns that we run are typically in around 4 or more markets. How we operate is basically via a network of local teams that we've got in 29 countries. The reason we do that is we're all about understanding search from a local level. So saying, actually, how do the French use the internet? How is that different to the Germans? How are the Chinese using search and so forth? And really looking at things from a local level as opposed to saying, okay, UK SEO strategy fits all. We've got some pretty good affiliations with some bodies like the Internet Advertising Bureau. eConsultancy is a leading source for digital insight in the UK, and we conduct all their training up and down the country. We do SEO, we do pay-per-click, we do social media, and something else we also specialize in is cultural multivariate testing. So we have a suite of tools called Global Maxer. Works very much on the same principles as Maximizer, Omniture's Test and Target, but it challenges the tests that you should be running by country. So it might be saying, okay, if we're working in Germany, we actually need to be testing larger call to action buttons. If we're working in France, let's use lighter colors. And the tool advises you, based on sites within those markets, conversion data that is built up, how you should best analyze sites per country. So lots of information today feeding out from our experience working with these tools and across these sort of sectors. Lastly, there's just some of our clients there. Okay, so to kick off, multilingual search, where do we start? Okay, so I've picked out some of the sort of core elements of multilingual search that should be considered in every campaign. Obviously, every search campaign starts with key phrases. And when we're looking at multilingual search, we're saying, should you just take the top 100 terms from your analytics that you're performing from in one country and just translate those to another country? Or do you really need to be localizing? Of course, you do need to be localizing. There's often one way of saying something in one country, 4 ways of saying it in another language, or it could be a different term altogether. So when we're looking at multilingual search, we're always looking at researching on a local level. I've got a couple of examples I'm going to show you in a moment about that. Looking at international search engines. Obviously, Google's very big in the UK, throughout most of Europe, but a lot of other search engines operate in territories certainly going further east, and the ways that those search engines work are different. They have different algorithms, and you need to be aware of that when optimizing for the best campaigns. And again, we're going to cover some more of that. Looking at site content for 2 reasons. First of all, localizing content for your audience, and I'll cover a bit of that in the next point. But also, again, when working with search engines other than Google, other than Yahoo, and other than Bing, you need to be aware that most of those engines put a much more preference to on-site elements, and lots of the things like keyword stuffing, banner ads, and so forth that used to be really high-ranking factors in Google, but are perhaps lower priority at the moment, are still quite applicable in lots of those engines. It's considering conversion behaviors and trends. So, for example, if you're running a pay-per-click campaign, again, if you've got a set of adverts for France, even if you've gone beyond translating, even if you've localized those adverts, they're still French adverts for a German audience, if that's the way you've gone. You need to be you've got to see, like TV adverts, from one country, say in France, to Hungary or something like that, to see the different things that convert people, and that should come through in your ad copy. There's different reasons people will click through in different countries. And again, if you're working with local people and you're looking at local competition and you're looking at local sites, you'll naturally start feeding some of that into your ad copy. So again, don't replicate, don't translate, localize fully. Domain names, localization, and hosting are going to come on to you later. And finally, global social media. So when we're looking at search campaigns, particularly obviously in the last year where Google started to place more of a weight to rankings from social media platforms, you need to be aware that, again, Facebook and Twitter are very big in the UK, very big in Western Europe, but to Twitter in China means to knit yourself a scarf. And there's lots of other platforms that operate outside of the UK. In Russia, biggest I think it's VKontakte. After that, it's Onika Kladsniki, and Facebook's only got a 10% market share. So when you're looking at global social media strategies, and when you're looking at social media strategies to influence SEO, be aware that you need to go beyond Facebook and you need to go beyond Twitter. Okay, so just to take you through some examples of sort of key phrase. Obviously, within this industry, people often assume that English is used as the language for searching for key terms like poker and so forth. And yes, that's pretty much true. But when you're conducting your research, and particularly if you're performing well on a range of terms, you need to be going a little bit further. So poker, for example, is the highest searched term in Finland for the term poker. So the English phrase, 246,000 searches, compared to pokeri, their translation, which is 33,000 searches. But actually, when you look at online poker, which is Neti Pokeri and Neti Pokeria, which is the Finnish translation, that's actually higher than the online poker term in English. So there's a difference there. And also, you've got a term online pokeri, a hybrid of English and of Finnish. And even though the search volume for that is quite small, again, if you're looking for niches and you're performing quite well on some of these other terms, there's a term to consider as well. And again, these things aren't found by translating. Finally, another example will be looking at the Italian search for cheap flights. So the perfect translation of cheap flights into Italian is voli economici, generates 33,000 searches a month on Google Italy. The term voli low cost, which is a hybrid of English and of Italian, generates 8 times as much search, 246,000. And this is quite intrinsic within a lot of the Italian search, that you do find quite a few English terminologies coming into other sectors other than gaming. So again, particularly Italy being quite a focused market at the moment, that's something to consider when researching. I mentioned the landscape earlier, so I'm just going to give you an overview of sort of search engines and where they are. So pretty much a rule of thumb is in the Americas, in Western Europe and Central Europe, Google is by far the most dominant engine, having almost a 95% plus market share in all of those markets. But as you start to move further east, in Czech Republic, you've got Seznam, which has a 35% market share there. You find Rambler and Yandex from Russia coming into sort of Ukraine, Estonia, some of the other Eastern European territories. When we move into the Middle East, Yahoo has more of a market share. You've got local engines like Rediff again popping up. And finally, if you go to Asia, it's a completely different ballgame altogether. Baidu's biggest search engine in China, Naver in Korea, I think it's Yam in Taiwan and so forth. So need to be aware that when you're operating in these kind of territories to have a look out and see what the local engines are. And a rule of thumb is if you do find a market where Google isn't the leading search engine, the chances are whatever that leading search engine is will have between a 40 to 70% market share. So if you're looking at a market where Google isn't the leading engine, you often might need to consider 2 search engines when you're developing your SEO strategy, or even 3 in some particular countries. Also understand how those local pay-per-click platforms work. Obviously, Google determines pay-per-click prices by competitiveness and by quality score, whereas for Baidu in China, the quality score is not determined by the page, it's actually determined by the advert. So the better ad copy you have and the more click-throughs you get on your ad, the lower the price goes down. So again, if you're optimizing campaigns, pay-per-click campaigns, you should be aware of that. I mentioned earlier, look into on-page optimization rules. They're typically much more important for, as I said, non-Google, Yahoo, and Bing engines, where their algorithms are still, say, 6 or 7 years behind. It's probably being a little bit harsh to some. But things like keyword densities and so forth are really still really important. And finally, if you are going to communicate with those local engine account managers, just start the communication early. It's always best to sort of try and build a relationship, particularly dealing with Yandex and so forth. Keep saying finally, but the slides keep coming up. There was one more point on search engines. Is looking at the usership as well. So a graph we've got here is heat maps looking at sort of where your eye tracking studies across Google US, Google China, and Baidu, which is the leading search engine in China. And obviously, in Google US, we can see the golden triangle we're all very familiar with, where you immediately look to the top left-hand side of the page and click on the first sort of 1 to 3 results. That's applicable in America, UK, again, Western Europe, but as you go further east, people start to look down the page a lot more. You've only got to see sort of Chinese, Japanese websites where they're all loads of flashing images on one page, where you scroll down a lot more, and that's intrinsic in how people then look in sort of search results. So for example, if you're optimizing a strategy, so if you're looking to target Baidu in China, you might be able to focus on a broader range of terms in your campaign but get the same visibility. That first 1 to 5 result real estate isn't as important, and actually just first page real estate can give you quite a bit of visibility. And again, with pay-per-click campaigns, not as important to bid for those top results. Again, you can focus on a wider range of terms. The other thing you can see from this is obviously there's a different usership from Google China to Baidu China, with Google showing a bit more of a Western search trend. Obviously, this is, since Google's pull out in China, this is now Google Hong Kong. But again, it shows that if you're targeting things like expats and so forth, maybe Google China or Google Hong Kong now is a better way to go. Okay, so hopefully that's got us the mindset in terms of some of the things that we look at with multilingual SEO and just how different search is. So I'm going to go a bit more in depth now and look at some key emerging markets and sort of expert tips for targeting those markets. And I will point it out as I go along, but there's a lot of tips that say we will use for Romania that you could use for other similar markets as well. Okay, so let's take Romania as a market. So Romania is a good market for search, and it's also a very good market for gaming, as most of us might be aware. First reason why it's a good market for search is Google's the leading engine. So it's got a 96.7% market share from latest statistics. The good thing about that is the same rules that we have for on-page optimization and off-page optimization apply to Google. Just to let you know, for those of you that aren't aware, Google doesn't have like a different algorithm for different countries it's in. There are things that you need to consider when you're operating campaigns across various markets where Google's operating, such as URL structure and so forth, but generally the rules that you apply are the same: quality link building, metadata, you know the stuff. So that's the reason why Romania's got a simple market to target. In terms of gaming, this study shows the difficulty level for targeting the term poker across a range of markets. Now, in Romania, most of you will be aware that poker is by far the highest searched form of gaming. I think out of gaming search across online roulette, blackjack, casino, and poker, it's got around 86% of the searches on poker. I'm going to explain how this difficulty score comes about, but from what we can see here is that for this term poker, across these territories, Romania has a 51% difficulty, which is far, far less than, say, Russia and France, or 10-15% less, which in search is quite a bit. But it's still got a very, very high search volume. So with a lower difficulty and a higher search volume, there's more chance of ROI. And how this difficulty score is calculated, this is from SEO Moz. So we look at the total search volume for the term poker in Romania. We look at the top 10 sites that rank for that term in terms of the domain authority of those sites and also the page authority, so the authority of the page that ranks for the term poker. And within SEO Moz, 51% of sites are easier to optimize for. So it's still a very competitive term, but it's slightly less competitive than, say, targeting poker in other markets, which is great because obviously poker's by far the leading search interest in Romania. If you're not familiar with this tool, it's something you can use, and when you're strategizing for your campaigns and looking what to target, SEO Moz tools are obviously really good to use. Another reason why Romania is quite a good market to target is this graph here shows the number of registered CCTLD domains in Russia, Italy, France, Romania, and Finland. And what we can see is Romania, although of course it's a small market, actually has twice as many registered domains as you get in Finland. Which is very good when we're looking at link building for two reasons. First of all, there's lots more sources to go to. So there's plenty more sites to actually build links on. And secondly, Romania is a younger online market generally than Finland. And for anybody that's tried to optimize for poker in Finland before, you probably know it's particularly difficult if you are publishing content. Buying links is, you get some pretty high prices and so forth. And in Romania, website owners are far less savvy. And that's actually the same for Russia as well. So these are really good markets in terms of linking opportunity to go for. But Romania is a small market. It's not the same as link building in the UK. It's not the same as link building in France and so forth. If you're running campaigns over for a longer than a year period, you might quickly run out of sources that you can go to, say, gaming sites and so forth. So here are some top tips that you can use in Romania, that you can use in Netherlands, Finland, markets, as I said, where there's a smaller online environment. So a lot of this is focusing actually around content, and obviously creating content is king, as the phrase goes. And the better content you can create, obviously, the better for your SEO generally in terms of on-site and off-site. But it's also how clever you are with that content. So, for example, something that you can look to do is, if you've got producing good articles and so forth, is instead of just approaching site owners, actually look for blogs and people that are actually looking for the content that you produce. So a technique could be to do a bit of keyword research, say in Romania, around guest blogging wanted poker, guest blogging poker, etc. And what you might be able to find is a handful, or if you're lucky, even more sites that are actually demanding the kind of content that you're already producing on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So that can be a great way of having a win-win situation with the site owner in terms of you're producing good content for them, and obviously you're embedding links within the content that you produce for those people. So that's a really good technique to sort of try and find other sources for links and not pay the highest rates if you do have to pay for article submission. Sponsoring competitions and events is one that obviously a lot of people get involved in, so looking at local poker competitions, local casinos, etc., and sponsoring them. You can look at open source projects. So I don't think there's too many of these within the gaming sector, so it'd be interesting if somebody could start sort of creating these kind of sites and so forth, where you might be sort of creating a site where on a daily or again weekly basis you start to put sort of top 5 tips for Texas Hold'ems and update that regularly. And if you've got a Twitter account, if you've got people you're affiliated with, getting them to place stuff on that site as well, and then naturally placing articles on there whenever you produce that and getting that good content retweeted. So creating a community around what you do and what you already know, content that's very easy for you to produce. Obviously, blogging is of a great way for a number of reasons in terms of producing fresh content to get good SEO rankings. But obviously, the more valuable insights that you provide, the more likely it is that your content will then get redistributed. So producing those kind of things on your blog is particularly good as well. Obviously, there's things where you can get getting top industry personalities. Again, that can tie into Twitter a little bit, getting their opinions and so forth on there. And researching in each market what's of interest to people. So when you're producing content, find out what the audience wants. It's different in different markets. Apologies for the slide. But for example, I mentioned earlier in Romania, where poker is the sort of leading search, holds the leading search interest at 89%. Russia, as most of us probably know, poker is the most popular there as well. But they're also very interested in casino. They're also very interested in roulette as well. So the content that you produce, don't just translate that and replicate that across your markets, because the stuff you talk about casinos, for example, in Romania might not be of interest. So again, try and always produce content to the audience, and by looking at keyword research and looking at statistics and overall search volumes, that's a good indicator of what people are actually interested in reading and finding within those markets. Okay. So Russia. Russia is now Europe's second biggest online market. It's extremely fast growth rate. I think in the last year, about 16 million went online in Russia, which to give you some idea of the size, in total, there's only 50 million people online in the UK. They should overtake Germany this year in terms of total internet population. And within a couple of years, there will be a very, very long way ahead. So really interesting market, good market to get into. Not that competitive right at this moment in time. We've had some pretty good results with clients on there that have generated sort of new sites and approaching the market. But when we're looking at Russia, the biggest search engine there is Yandex, and this slide is slightly out of date in that Rambler and Mail now have a slightly less % market share. So Google's at around 30% and Yandex around 58% at the moment. So of course, if we're targeting search in Russia, we need to be looking at Yandex as a search engine. And Yandex is a notoriously difficult search engine to optimize for, as I'm sure anybody that's tried to get rankings on there is aware of. So I'm going to run through some top tips for Yandex. I did cover this when I spoke in Budapest, but this is updated and we're going to go a little bit more in depth as well. Okay, so first thing, if you're running a campaign in Russia and you're running a campaign trying to get results on Yandex, install Yandex Webmaster Tools. It has its own set suite of tools. What's great is about 6 months ago, Yandex launched its platform in English, so now you can go through all the analytics and everything in English, which is obviously particularly helpful if you don't speak Russian. It's quite simple to set it up, similar to Google. You just sign up for a free mail account, submit your URL, etc. The first thing you want to do once you've done that is submit your site to Yandex. Yandex is finds it particularly difficult to index content. It's very, very slow at doing that. And we've come across clients that for 7 months have been link building in Russia, have 200 pages worth of content, not seeing particularly good rankings and wondering why. And we've gone and had a look that Yandex has only actually indexed 3 of their pages, and when their entire site has been in Russian. So really important first step, make sure you submit in Yandex Webmaster Tools. The second thing you need to do is check the geo-targeting. What you can do within Russia is target a certain city. So if you want to target Moscow or St. Petersburg, you can set that within Webmaster Tools. But what often happens is you'll automatically be assigned a city. Now, if you're trying to target the whole of Russia, that is going to impact your rankings in other territories within Russia. So within Webmaster Tools, make sure you go to the regional settings and make sure you set no region needed for Yandex. You can also target several cities if you want to. That need doesn't come up very often, but you need to register for a Yaka account, which is quite similar to DMOZ, so it takes a little while to it's not as simple as just getting it. You need to submit a proposal, etc. So geo-targeting, index your site. First 2 things with the Yandex. Other core on-site considerations to make are avoid automatic redirects. Obviously, that's never desirable, but particularly where you're hosting language, say via an IP address, that's undesirable for Yandex. Make sure you have lots of Russian content. Again, we've come across and worked with lots of clients where, say, we've taken a French site where they've got 100 pages in French and they've localized 20 pages for Russia. And that's worked fine for Google, but for Yandex, it requires more content because it can't read that non-Russian content. It can't give any value to your site of being bigger with another language. So make sure you produce lots of content for Russia for Yandex. Go local in terms of the domain, which obviously for operators can be a little bit tricky. But .com is not authority domain for Yandex. So having a subdirectory or a subdomain using .com isn't going to give you any preference in Yandex. You won't be able to pass link value over. So if you're an affiliate, always try and go for the fully localized domain. Obviously, if you're an operator, you can't really do that because of legal reasons. So choose probably a subdirectory because that's obviously more desirable for Google in most cases. As I mentioned earlier, avoid keyword stuffing, avoid things like pop-up banners, on-site considerations that you used to have to make for Google and sort of top of our minds 5 years ago. Those are still pretty important for Yandex, so make sure you avoid those things. And get your meta titles right. Yandex actually doesn't pull the data it shows under the search result from your meta description. It will just randomly pull it from your site. I'm not entirely sure how it works. So it's worth considering call to actions and making your meta titles very descriptive so people will click through in Yandex. Build local links. This is always really interesting, actually, to again cover. So it applies for Russia, but it applies for any market. If you're ever trying to optimize in a certain country, it sounds pretty obvious, but again, it's often overlooked. You need to build links if you're optimizing in Finland from Finnish sites, ideally hosted in Finland. The same for Sweden, the same for Spain, and of course the same for Russia. Particularly for Russia, particularly for the Czech Republic, particularly for China, where you're working with different engines, because those engines can't read your other links. So whereas Google does give you a little bit of preference, if you say you've got 100 links from American sites and you're optimizing in Spain, you might get some value from those links that you have in America. You can't really expect to get any value for a global search engine. So make sure that make sure that you take that into consideration and build locally. And you should be doing it for Google anyway, particularly in gaming. Oh, actually, there was one more point on the link building. In terms of types of links, again, the algorithms are a bit slower with some of these international search engines. So quality, the same sort of scores that you get for Google aren't quite as important. And actually what we found is forum links, social media type links for Baidu and for Yandex are particularly desirable, and you can kind of get a higher quality there. Right, last thing on Yandex. It's quite a slow search engine, so don't panic if you don't get results straight away. Typically, it does take 3 or 4 months longer to sort of get the same results that you would get on Google in Yandex. Some reasons for this are the crawling rate is far slower, so Google crawls sites every 1 to 2 days, but Yandex crawls sites only every 1 to 2 weeks, and again, it misses indexing, it misses links when it does that, so it just takes a little bit longer. Another thing is sites do disappear from Yandex from time to time. Whenever it updates its algorithm, that can happen. I know Google updates its algorithm about 320 times a year. I think Yandex, we can safely assume, is a little less, but when they do it, it does happen. So if you see your poker site disappear from Yandex in Russia, don't jump off a cliff. Give it a day or two, and you might find that you come back. It does often happen. There's nothing you can really do about it. That's just the nature of the beast with Yandex. Rankings also are much more prone to fluctuations. So the best thing you can do is take some of the points that I mentioned about the on-site considerations and the off-site considerations to produce the best results you possibly can for a Yandex campaign. Okay, so Google Markets. So some top SEO tips for 2011 that you can apply to any campaign where you're running with Google. So improving site speed. Now, obviously, having a faster site has always been desirable in Google because, it's always been desirable because of conversions and people being able to go to many more pages in your site. But Google came out about 2 or 3 months ago and said that this is now a factor within their rankings. So things that you can do to improve your site speed. Obviously, if you've got a very, very large website of tens of thousands of pages, look at using content delivery networks. Can, again, be quite difficult within this sector because you can't always have hosting and servers where you would like them. But a rule of thumb is to try and go as geographically close to location as possible. For example, if you're trying to target Russia, use Malta instead of Gibraltar. Also, don't be stingy with the traffic volumes of the server. Make sure your server is appropriate for the volume of traffic you expect to receive from countries. Use and optimize caching. Obviously, that's great for returning users to the website so they don't have to download all the images and everything on the site every single time they come. That also has a knock-on effect to Google rankings now as well. If you have got a site where you've got lots of images, or very large images that are higher megabytes, etc., use sprites to break those images down so you limit the number of HTTP requests. There are a lot of techniques you can use for this. If you pretty much just Google limit HTTP requests, you'll get a number of ideas on how you can do that, and that's really important for increasing your site speed. Also, optimize your images, so use the right formats. So, for example, for images with loads of colors, use JPEGs. For low color images, use GIFs or GIFs. Some tools that you can use to see how fast your site is or how fast Google thinks your site is within analytics. Around, I think, 6 weeks to a couple of months ago, they launched a tool where you can see what the average page load speed is. So you want to do that for your home page, you want to do that for your conversion pages in particular, and it will find those for you. Once you've found those pages, there's 2 really good plugins you can download. Yahoo's got one, YSlow Firefox plugin, and Google's Page Speed plugin. And they will give you more reasons why that page is slow. So whether it's HTTP requests, images, whatever, it will give you some more information on that. And then you can take the appropriate steps to amend that within your strategy. So improving site speed, if you're operating in any market with Google, this now applies. Optimize your URL structure. So it's always been desirable to have a good URL structure for Google. But again, only a couple of months ago, our good friend Matt Cutts came out and said that having keywords within URLs is now particularly desirable. And as only recently Google put a lower preference, or doesn't give as much preference to sites that have keywords within domains, making sure you have keywords within your URLs is particularly desirable. Other core elements that you need to be looking at with your URL structure, obviously keep them descriptive, keep them short. It can be also beneficial to follow the page architecture with your URL, so follow the user journey in terms of page 1 / sub page 2 instead of combining those. So keep them short, don't use the at in, but make sure you're also following the architecture. Use things like dashes rather than underscores for worse spaces. Keep the URLs consistent, so watch out for things. I mean, URLs are case sensitive, right? So make sure you're not having any duplicate content issues, and where you are, you're using 301 redirects, canonical tags, to make that not implement you. And keep the URL static looking, so no page equals 1, 2, 5, 6, 10, unless you've got a million products, right? So don't use session IDs if you can avoid that. And of course, don't end any URLs with sort of .0, .exe or anything like that. So those are two really important things, I think, for 2011 that we would say the most important things that we're applying to our campaigns at the moment for any market where we've got a client that works in Google. Okay. So I've actually hammered through that quite quickly. So to sum up, the world of internet usership and search is hugely diverse. So search varies enormously from country to country in terms of the behaviors people have, how they search, what makes them convert, what engines they use. So always be aware that you need to approach your SEO per market, not per language, right? There's no global solution to targeting Spanish SEO, right? You have to target SEO for Spain, you have to target SEO for Mexico, SEO for Colombia, same for the UK SEO strategy, Indian SEO strategy, US SEO strategy, even if it's English. Obviously, look at emerging markets and be aware of online spends within particular countries in terms of how much people are actually spending as well. The market might look great in terms of volume of people online, what they're searching for, but also look at the value of those players and the value of those people as well. How are we for time, James? All right, okay, because I can go on to talk a little bit about Global Maxer. So I mentioned at the beginning, we've got a suite of tools called Global Maxer, which is a cultural multivariate testing software. So the obvious thing when you're performing well in all the markets that you're operating in is to convert users better within those territories. So I'm going to take you through a case study. It's not to promote the tool, but it's just to demonstrate how important it is to look at colors and look at conversion factors by territory. So Mio is a large sat-nav manufacturer, and we ran tests across 5 of their sites in the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And we were testing things like larger page title, increased size of call to action buttons, swapping positions from the graphics from, say, the left to the right, and testing those variations against the original. So an example of a test. There you are, simply moving the image from the left to the right, and the price from the right to the left. And these are some of the results we got. So we can see for the larger call to action button, we had a 160% increase in conversions for the UK, but in France, we actually had a 15% decrease in conversions for just that tiny element. Any kind of assumptions you have about Italian, sort of Southern Europeans and having sort of similar conversion habits, again, that's shown within the larger call to action button that, again, the increased conversions in Spain and actually decreased conversions in Italy. And this was all done on one page. And these tests showed that I think something like an additional 300,000 euros worth of revenue just by being aware that there are different conversion points on one page for one product per market. So again, if you are doing multivariate testing, if you've got that far in your campaigns, that's excellent. It's good to see that this is an area, we certainly see it as an area that's growing and growing. But also be aware that if you've got a templated site, that just because a change in the UK has increased your conversions, putting that into another country doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen. So be aware of those things. Okay, so that was quite a bit of information covered in probably a bit of a shorter time than I thought. So if anybody would like a copy of the presentation, please just come up and see me after. We're also over on stand B50 in the business section as well. I'll be happy to give you that. And we'll be around for the next couple of days for questions and so forth as well. But I believe we are going to stop for some questions now as well. So,
yeah, if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and then we can...
Sorry, when you said optimized your images, I just missed your examples of how you would do that.
Sure. It's just looking to use the best files for the images you have. So where you've got images that have lots and lots of colors, use a JPEG. If you've got an image that's more pixelated, use a GIF file. So just make sure you research all the different types of things you can save under. We've all used Paint, and you can choose whether you save under PG or whatever. So just make sure that you use the most appropriate one for the image that you have that reduces the size of that image, and that speeds up your site. Any other questions?
You have?
All right, that's pretty easy. Okay,
Hello,
thanks very much, everyone.
SEO Moz has been trying to demonstrate that direct attachment to Twitter and Twitter users that have some credibility is pushing rankings farther than linking. Can you expand on that?
I'm not particularly sure about that. I mean, we know that there are now being synergies between Twitter and Google rankings, and there was a podcast that Matt Cutts again came out with not so long ago, which explained that in more detail. I think from what we would say is that it's also looking at social media and looking how you can utilize that for your rankings. So, for example, a great tactic to do if you're producing content on a monthly basis on a blog or whatever on your site is to create a Twitter account, follow, say, 50 to 100 key professionals within the industry, and those people should follow you back, and then just produce your content on Twitter within links, and that should naturally then get redistributed. So I think social media, and particularly Twitter, is having a number of influences for various reasons, but it's also utilizing that form of media to get more results out of your SEO campaigns as well.
I just have a question. How do you optimize an English website for a particular market if it's not translated in that language? For instance, an English website, but you want users from Hungary, Romania, whatever, find the content.
Yes, good question. The answer is it's pretty difficult to do. I mean, if you're trying to optimize for a Hungarian term and you've got an English website, you're going to find it particularly difficult to optimize for that term. However, what you could be doing is looking at targeting global English search, so English phrases that are used in, say, Hungary and that are used online within various markets, which, as I showed earlier, do happen. And really the best advice I have for that is looking at off-site optimization, so building links within those markets for those keywords. So even though it's English, just producing a few articles in English but publishing them on Hungarian websites. That's normally the best way to go. And normally, if you are targeting an English term in a foreign language, that term might be less competitive because they're mainly using their own language. So for a number of clients where they're just targeting global English for SEO, we've mainly focused on off-site work. There's not really a lot you can do on-site unless you're going to have that language. Okay.
Just quickly on keyword tools.
Yes.
We've seen, obviously, there's a Yandex tool, and this is probably specific to the markets you operate in. But apart from the Google keyword tools, what other sort of tools are there out there which you'd recommend?
A really good tool is keyword. Into that, and you'll automatically get information on their pay-per-click campaigns, their SEO campaigns, and what they're optimizing for. And when you're doing that, when you're analyzing competition in each market, what you specifically want to be looking out for is local sites. So, for example, don't use an English brand. So if you're analyzing a French competitor, don't let it be an English brand's French site. Go for a French brand in itself, and that will give you those local terms that you might not necessarily find by translating and replicating, because the chances are somebody else has done it wrong. So keyword spy, particularly good, and look for local sites that are within that market, that are from that market. There's a site called, forgive me if I don't pronounce it correctly, it's piwic.org, and they have got a set of tools as well, which is a really good competitor analysis tool, and that's in 40 different languages as well, which is really great. So that's another really good site to go to. Download their set of tools. I think it's even free, and that gives you loads of really good information about your competitors, but also gives you information on keyword strategies as well. It's piwic.org.
And just quickly, following the incidents in Black Friday, what have we seen with this sort of international search patterns for poker?
Yeah, at this stage, we haven't detected too much change, but I think over time, depending on what happens with the legalities, obviously those sites that were promoting in America are going to start upping their marketing efforts within Europe, which I guess if you're a European operator is bad in the sense that it might become more competitive, but I think it's quite good in terms of there should be lots of promotion around that as well. So I think at the moment it's kind of balancing out. So far in our campaigns we haven't seen any real differences in search volumes, but I think it's fair to say that providing the ban holds itself over the next year, then or they don't change the law even over the next year, then there should be it's probably going to become more competitive for poker within Europe.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry.
Hi. You say a lot of the the search engines abroad are a few years behind, say, search engines like Google and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what would still be classed as white hat on those search engines that now Google don't like, and also where you'd be able to find out about the changes in search engines abroad and how you keep up with the changes.
Yeah. I think in terms of... I think you should be applying any sort of quality that you have now with your Google campaigns in terms of white hat techniques. You should just be applying to those engines anyway. The on-site points that I picked out about the keyword stuffing and so forth, it's just being more aware of those. So some of the sort of basics that again now are probably less of a priority for Google in terms of metadata optimization and so forth are still quite important ranking factors for those engines. How you can keep up to date. There's a great site called globalstats.com. If you just type in global stats to Google, you don't even have to sign up for an account. And it's got a tool there you can use where you can see latest shares of search engines and territories. So if you want to see, what the situation is like in Estonia, for example, go to Global Stats, type in Estonia, type in search engine, and you can see where they rank. I will say it's not 100% accurate. In fact, it's more like 50 to 60% accurate, but it's a good indication, and it will show you where Google isn't leading in a particular market, and it will show you that whenever that happens, as I mentioned earlier, that you need to be more careful. Internet World Stats is another good site you can go to just to see sort of general internet population and percentage population in those territories. So if you're approaching quite a new online market, that can be quite good to see the sort of size of that. And then the standard ones that you look at, I think Search Engine Land even has a section on multilingual SEO now, and I think people are talking about it more and more. So those quality sources are good things to keep up with, as always, with SEO.
Okay, and just to finish up, if you had one tip for operator and affiliate in terms of international SEO strategy, what would the number one tip be?
Number one tip, I think, is localize. And the best way to localize, if you don't have resources around the globe, is to speak to local players, find out what they're interested in various markets, find out how they're searching and so forth. It can be what we've done with quite a few of our clients that don't have sort of big budgets to sort of be producing loads of content and so forth, is just to look at that sort of competition element I talked about earlier, where you create kind of community and get players integrating on there and using some of their content. But the biggest factor in multilingual SEO is to localize, and just keep in your mind that replicating any strategy from one country to another without fully localizing is going to impede the results you get. It's not always possible. We don't always all have the resource and the budget to, understand exactly how the Chinese search. But the more you can be doing to really investigate that market, look at local competition, and localize, the better results you get.
Okay, I think we'll finish up there. Thank you very much to John Murphy for that.
Thanks, everyone.
Great presentation. Thank you very much, John.